This episode of The Business of Agriculture is brought to you by Nori. Feeling left out of carbon markets? Nori is a carbon removal marketplace that welcomes early adopters of regenerative farming. We work directly with farmers to enter their data and project their carbon credits, which the farmer owns and sets the price on. Nori is the marketplace, not the middleman, so farmers get paid directly once their credits are sold. We believe that carbon credits should be an asset the farmer controls, not the rights that they sell. To learn more on how you can enroll your farm, visit nori.com/growers. And if you are a company looking to get involved with carbon markets, reach out to hello@nori.com. Nori, a carbon marketplace for early adopters. Visit nori.com/growers.
Well, greetings and welcome to another fantastic episode of The Business of Agriculture with me, Damian Mason. And I'm telling you what, we got a great topic today. We have on Rebekah, Carlson, and Giovanni Sornatale from Nori. Nori came on board as a sponsor. And also, I am so excited about this because it's about carbon. You know, we recorded an episode, dear listener, about carbon a year and a half ago. And we've been hearing about carbon for several years now in ag, and I'm still trying to make it all make sense because I hear about carbon programs. And I know companies say they're going to pay you for carbon. Well, I don't know a lot about it, and I'm guessing you don't either. So that's why I'm excited. Nori came on as a sponsor of the podcast, but more importantly, they're going to tell us about the entire marketplace, the marketplace of carbon. And so in this episode, we're talking about the marketplace of carbon, and we're going to hear it from a farmer. We got a guy named Kyle Mehmen. Kyle Mehmen is an Iowa producer. He also has a trucking company and multiple other business entities that go along with the farming operation there in Plainfield, Iowa. And he's going to talk about what he sees happening in carbon from his vantage point as a customer / business partner within the Nori marketplace system. So anyway, Kyle, thanks for being here.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Gio and Rebekah, thanks for giving us the knowledge and being a part of the business of agriculture. And I know that you're going to get some activity out of this because my listeners are saying, hey, man, I remember you had Kelly Garrett on a year and a half ago and we talked about carbon. Where are we? What's going on? So I want you to tell us all of that, okay?
All right, will do. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right, Kyle. You're in your 40s. You've been around agriculture. You're a smart guy. You start hearing about carbon, and you looked at this and said, "I'll take money to do some practice on my farm." Tell me how this happened.
Yeah. So Dave, my carbon journey kind of started. First off, I'm super thankful that agriculture right now, we're in a wonderful place financially, have had net farm incomes as high as we've had in quite some time. But honestly, my journey started a couple of years back when things weren't as rosy. And so I gave a talk a while back ago, and I had my first slide just shows the market, the corn market. And I'm like, here's where my carbon journey kicked off. And I think corn was like $3.20 a bushel at the time. So really what we were looking to do at the time was say, okay, I'm sick of putting together break-even budgets all the time. If everything goes well, I hope that we can break even. What is another revenue source, or what can we do that isn't going to cost us more money, but it's something that we can derive revenue from with resources and maybe some data that we already have in place. And so carbon obviously is beginning to be a buzzword. And so that's really when our research started. And so really for us, it's come out of a necessity. It's no different than, exploring an additional business, if it's a trucking business or an elevator or whatever it may be. I was just looking to say, what business or revenue stream could I add to my operation that doesn't have an inherent big infrastructure cost to add?
Yeah, so you looked at it as a diversification of revenue. I'm a small biz guy. I've been for 28 years. Mrs. Mason and I were just talking about it here a few months ago, looking out over the horizon of the year 2022. And I said, you know what I'm excited about? I said, I have 5 different revenue streams, not counting just investments, 5 different revenue streams. I said, you know what? That's really important because it took me a long time to get here, because when one thing is a little bit off, I'm not stressing and pulling my hair out. I've got 4 other things that should be chugging along. If 2 things are off, I've still got 3 things that are chugging along, bringing in cash flow, because as you know, and I know, cash flow, revenue stream. So you looked at carbon as a revenue stream. Tell us about your operation, because carbon is now a part of the revenue stream at MBS Family Farms, but it wasn't a couple of years ago. So you got row crop farming. You got what else?
Yeah. So it's funny you mentioned the different revenue streams. So first off, we have we own not only farm in Northeast Iowa, but we have kind of a pod in Southern Minnesota as well that we consider kind of a diversification. We run a trucking business where we commercially truck, and then also have for our own movement of products and goods. Run a sea chemical fertilizer, a retail business. We own an elevator that has a couple locations where we take grain in there, not only for our own use but for other customers in the community. We run a small farm management agency that also sells crop insurance. So you can see there's a lot of different moving parts. But honestly, the last time that we were in the economic boom of agriculture back, last time corn was $6 and $7.
I remember. You sound like an old timer here, Kyle.
I know. I turned 44 on Friday, and I feel like I've aged a lot in the last 20 years. But
it was just from 06 to 013. So our last super cycle ended less than 10 years ago. We're recording this, dear listener, in April of 2022, just for reference. So we actually went in a very short period. It's normally about 30 to 50 years between booms, and now we're only 9 years between booms, right?
Exactly. And I remember saying to my family, the last boom, saying, man, we should get rid of all of these complementary businesses. It's drawing away from our focus on growing $7 corn. They're just a distraction. Mm-hmm. And, when we were going through starting our carbon journey, when corn was 320, we said, we should stop growing corn because it's just a distraction from these auxiliary businesses that are actually holding our operation together. So I guess the good news is it's really our way of diversifying the same way my grandfather diversified 50 years ago by having chickens and pigs and milk cows and everything. That was his diversification play. And I see this as our 21st century diversification.
All right. So how did this come about? Gio, you are the person at Nori that sells the carbon to companies or entities. Tell us a little bit about how that works, and then we're going to have Rebekah tell us about how we find Kyle and how Kyle and Nori came together.
Yeah, sure. From super high level, there's businesses out there in the world that realize that through their business activity, they're releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and they're contributing to climate change, which is obviously a huge conversation, and it leaves everybody asking what they can do to help. We've gotten to the point now where, every single scientific report is pointing to the fact that we need to remove carbon from the atmosphere in order to reverse these, detrimental effects that we're causing. So that's kind of where Nori comes in, right? Our mission is to reverse climate change by taking enough carbon out of the atmosphere in order to do so. That's the solution. So by working with farmers like Kyle and others who are actively sequestering carbon, taking it out of the atmosphere and storing it in their soil, we're able to measure, how much that carbon is. We're able to sell that by the ton in our marketplace, and we're able to provide that as a way for businesses to be able to purchase carbon removal or to, in other words, reverse their emissions. There's still a lot of work on the ground to be done in terms of not putting the carbon in the atmosphere in the first place. But Nori is focused on growing a carbon removal marketplace. And right now we make it easy for buyers to be able to fund this regenerative future.
Yeah. So one thing that's neat, and a person listening to this heard in our intro, which is sponsored by you, that it's not a middleman. It's Nori is a marketplace. And so kind of expand upon that. So in other words, Kyle's got acres and he's willing to change some practices and sequester more carbon, or maybe he's already done so, but he doesn't know how to sell them. He goes down to the local co-op. They don't know what the hell to do. And he goes and hangs. He needed to get a marketplace. Enter you. Tell me how it comes together.
Yep. Yeah. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible for farmers like Kyle, and Rebekah can expand on this a little bit, to be able to hear about Nori, enroll their acres, get their measurements done, and put that carbon removal into the marketplace to sell. We make it super easy. We let the farmer set their price, and we act as essentially a direct sales arm for your carbon sequestration efforts. The price that you set is the price that the buyers see. So if it's selling for $15, $20 a ton, whatever it is, the buyer rests assured that 100% of that listed price is going directly to the supplier, and Nori's adding a fee on top of that on the buyer's end. So we try to make it as super clear, straightforward, and transparent as we possibly can. And in doing so, we sometimes provide a little bit too much information that can actually confuse people, but we're really working on trying to, fold this up into a nice package for everybody.
It can be confusing. That's why I got you on here. And I really appreciate you being so transparent here. Rebekah, so you were sitting in your office one day and your phone rings and it's Kyle and he says, give me some money. Give me some carbon money. Tell me how this happened.
Well, let's see. Okay. Well, it's a long process. So I'm pretty sure Kyle was here before I was at Nori, to be honest. Maybe it was right when it started. So basically, like when farmers come to us, working with it, it takes a lot of patience to get through, right? Like we're kind of the first one in this new wave of carbon markets. So the learnings of what it actually takes to get the appropriate, data through, data which we'd never own. We only use it to run the modeling that informs the carbon credits, but like that process takes time. So Kyle and I have been working for 2 years, basically, of what it took to get him into the process. And it was really getting his data, from Conservice, actually, is exported to us. And that amount of information, we then had to tweak and make sure that, is this actually match what we did? We needed more data. So we have to ask a lot of questions with Kyle of what were your historic practices, and filling that whole set of information out. And all of those records fed into a model that we use to estimate how much more carbon that Kyle is putting into his soil based on these practices. And
all right, so that began a while back, and we talk about data. Everybody's in about the data. The big equipment companies are all about data collection, and now some of these farm operators are like, "Hey, wait a minute, am I just being used so everybody can surveil me?" Tell me what's happening here, Kyle. You basically just said, "Go ahead and spy on me." Is that what you did?
Well, not in so many words, but I got to tell you, Damon, and this is not necessarily a broad scale a feeling, but it's certainly my feeling. If I was concerned, I'm really kind of over the data privacy thing. I mean, data privacy is important to me. I appreciate that companies like Nori are very forthright in saying exactly what their plan is to do with my data and why and how they're going to use it. And if I had a dollar for every data agreement that I have signed, I would have a few dollars. But I guess my concern has gotten to be less over time, because honestly, if I was super concerned about what data companies were collecting on me and how they may use it against me, I'd never carry my cell phone around with me. I can guarantee you I'm going to get out on Facebook later on this evening, and I'm going to hear about the Business of Agriculture podcast. It's going to be an ad that pops up because I'm talking about it right now, right? If I was worried about the satellites spying on me, it's too late. The horse has left the barn. But I guess I do appreciate the fact that it's there is a policy out there.
I appreciate the fact that you think I pay for Facebook ads for my podcast. But we just rely on the fact that it's so damn good that we don't have to advertise. People just come here. All right. So the point is, you've got to provide a certain amount of stuff. So the person listening to this right now, remember, my listeners are hardworking, educated agricultural professionals. Some of them are farmers. Some of them have ties to the farm and work in industry, whatever. And they're right now, because I'm always trying to think like them, they're driving in a car listening to this right now, and they're going, what data? What do I got to give them? Kind of like you. They're saying, I'm not going to give you my child's social security number, but if you just want to know some of my practices, I have to turn into NRCS anyhow to be compliant with a government program because they funded a drainage ditch. Sure. What are you giving them?
Yeah, so I think it's important to say, step one, if anybody that I talk to about, what's the first step that I should do in preparing myself to be involved in a carbon market? And my number one answer is, know what you have. Get your information in order, because I can guarantee that I can be in a room full of farmers, and Damon, you'd say, hey, who in this room has great data? And 90% of the room is going to raise their hand and say, you bet I do. And the real truth of the matter is that 5% of you actually do have data that's mineable, usable, and in a format in which it can be ingested into something like Nori's platform or anything else. And so the number one thing I would say is just get your life in order a bit, right? If you're a shoebox guy, get your stuff on a spreadsheet. If you're a spreadsheet guy, get your stuff into maybe a system like a Conservis or a Granular. Conservis has been a mainstay in our operation for like 10 years. But that's the kind of data. And then the next thing is that understand what data they're actually going to need. For years, we didn't collect any information about our tillage data because we're like, what for? What we're not applying anything. What do we need to know our tillage data for?
Right.
Luckily, we started collecting it 4 or 5 years ago, because we're like, at some point it may be important for us to understand this. And it's just nice to know what we did a couple of years ago for different tillage practices. Well, all of a sudden that information is really useful when it comes to carbon markets. And we hadn't even envisioned that being a useful item.
Okay. By the way, did you catch that thing? 80% would raise their hand and say, we've got great. And he says 5%. It's got me thinking. I once read that 85% of humans believe they're above average. All right. So
not everybody can be above average, Damian. Not everybody.
I think half of us can be. I mean, I'm striving.
One day I hope to be average. I hope that I can hit that bar.
I think statistically half of us can be above average, but I also cheated through stat class. Okay. Answer me this, Rebekah. You want his information, and it's going to be about tillage, et cetera. Does this go through a government agency? Does it have to be NRCS, USDA approved, or is just, here's what I've been doing? And then you say, okay, you went to reduce tillage. You went to more residue management stuff, whatever these things are. Is it a template? Are you just giving me a form where I check it off, like when I go to the doctor and I put in there what drugs I'm on, or is this custom to every person?
It's really detailed information. So we ask for a form for some like the historic information, like best management practices through like the 2000s, right? Nobody has records for that. You buy 200 pounds of fertilizer in the fall, you tilled in the spring, cool. But for the more recent years around that switch, we really go by like a field by field, year by year, like basis of, okay, in this year, what did you plant? When did you plant it? Great. How did you till? When did you till? And all of those like pieces of data feed into the most appropriate outcome of the model that we use. So we have like an interface to Soil Metrics, and Soil Metrics uses basically Comet Farm to power what the carbon quantification is. But that spreadsheet is what we have, and we're simplifying that process over time, but we really want to start pretty tight on the data.
So Rebekah, the person that's listening to this right now says, hey, you know what? I'm all about diversification of revenue streams. I agree with you, Kyle. I mean, right, $7 corn, I don't feel like but I also remember $3.20 corn. I'm looking for new revenue streams. I shouldn't be intimidated, right? I shouldn't be intimidated that this is stealing my data or it's too much stuff. It's not that difficult. It's just more detailed, right?
Yeah. To me, I think it's a deal. I've always been, I'm not a very good learner unless I just jump in the deep end of the pool and figure out how to swim. Right. So that's really where we started off with Nori, and in full disclosure, I'm working with five different companies on carbon credits. And,
did you not get the memo that Nori is my sponsor of my podcast? There's only one company in the world that does this carbon thing, Kyle. Okay.
Well, I've been fully disclosed to Rebekah about this for a long time as well. So, but honestly, the reason for that was nothing against any of the other companies I'm working with or Nori either. I don't know what I don't know, right? Yeah. And so I've had good, bad, and ugly experiences with all of them, and have learned a tremendous amount. And it's really been helpful to us in our next wave of effort to know what information is needed when and how to best capture it.
So it sounds like once you get through compiling the data and information, that's some details, but it's not undoable, because if you're a good farming operation, you know what the hell you're doing anyhow. So that part's fine. Now you just talked about the fact that you've been in contact with 4 other carbon outfits. Nori is a marketplace. They say, listen, man, you do this and all that. Aren't some of the other ones sort of coming to you and saying, here's what we're going to allow you to make? Isn't that? Because that's what I've heard from some of my farming connections. We're going to allow you to make a couple dollars. And then really it seems like they're making a big spread in the middle.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different models to this. And so this is a very positive item that I will give for Nori, is that I'm a capitalist. I'm a free market guy. I really like the idea. They've allowed a marketplace for me to, see what my credits are truly worth in an open marketplace. I have other folks that I work with where they're just simply paying me for practices. Now, I think that's something that is less intensified for, the information that I need to give them. It's a bit of an easier button, maybe. But I also feel like I'm probably leaving some dollars on the table with those folks. It depends where you want to be, right? It's kind of pay for performance, right? Some things are more painful than others, but then I think that you probably get compensated accordingly. And it all depends on how you want to approach the market, right? If you just want an easy button and say, I get so many dollars an acre, perfect. If you want to be more involved in a true marketplace like Nori, there's an option for that too. And I'm a marketplace guy.
I like marketplace. In fact, I like marketplace and I like capitalism so much that we're going to pause right now and take a little message from another company that I work with called Pattern Ag. Hear from my friend at Pattern Ag, and then we're going to come back and we're going to hear from our friend Kyle about pricing. Question: have you ever lost yield to an unexpected pest or disease? Now I'm talking to farmers and landowners here. But it's every season that you're forced to guess about some of your most important management decisions. Well, now you don't have to. Pattern Ag offers the most advanced soil analysis available today. In addition to a comprehensive nutrient analysis, they can predict next season's risk from the most damaging pests and diseases, including corn rootworm, soybean cyst nematode, sudden death syndrome, and more. For the first time ever, a single soil analysis can help you optimize your crop protection and fertility spend at a subfield, field, and operation level. Refine your management decisions, optimize inputs, and maximize your yield. Go to www.pattern.ag and get started today. All right, so we're back, and pricing. That's kind of a big deal. We want to know how you go about doing this. I wouldn't have any idea. You know what? I'd say if there's some company, if Gio has done a good job, he brings me Elon Musk money who wants to offset carbon from all that SpaceX thing. I say, great, I'll take your money, Elon. I would have no idea how much to ask for. How do you know? Nori has something called like a Nori metric unit or a Nori carbon ton or something like this. Tell me all the pricing and measurement stuff. And I guess start with maybe Gio, because he has to sell it and then bring it back to the farm.
Yeah, well, actually, let's flip it, because it actually starts with the farmer. We get the inventory first, and then we go out and sell that inventory. That's how it started. But yeah, we try to work with as many farmers as we can to get as much, carbon removal on the shelf. They're called NRTs, Nori remote tons. So one NRT.
I was close. I called it something.
You were pretty
like
close.
That.
You had all those words there somewhere.
So one NRT is 1 ton of carbon that's been removed from the atmosphere and stored in a terrestrial reserve. In this case, right now, it's soil. And that's what we're selling to our buyers. So when a buyer is coming to us and they say, okay, our footprint for 2020 was 500 tons, and we want to pay for 500 tons of carbon removal, they're purchasing 500 NRTs from us. They're getting that in the form of a certificate, and that certificate, has 500 NRTs that have been taken off of the shelf, have been retired permanently, so those can never be sold to anybody else, right? Those 500 tons of carbon removal are now yours forever, the buyer, and that comes ideally from farms like Kyle's.
And so you've got them sold, and then there's a dollar amount. Now, that's the thing. You said that the farmer sets the price, but really does he? Because he doesn't know for sure. We've heard so much information about what it's worth. You guide him or tell him, hey, here's what the marketplace looks like. He said previously, he said that he likes the fact that who's giving that money? Are you giving that price advice, Gio?
I'm not giving the price advice. What the farmer's doing is setting a floor price. We could technically go out and sell that for more than what the floor price is, but the minimum amount that the farmer is going to get paid is the floor price that he or she sets. And that's what we're, typically going out with. We're going to try to go out with a little bit more if we can, but it really depends on the deal and the conversation.
Rebekah, did you advise or guide our man Kyle on how to charge?
No, I just said, this is what it's going at now. And to note on what Gio was saying, like, if we can sell it for more, that just means that the farmer will get more. So like, for example, if they're like, I will not take less than $15, I'm like, hey, we can try to sell it at $20. Awesome. That $20 will go to the farmer and not to us. We'll take.
You're gonna put the 15% on top of whatever you sell.
Yes. And that's important to know. We talk in terms of the price of the NRT that's going to the farmer. So if we're talking to a buyer and we're saying that we're selling it to you for $15, we're selling it to you for $20, we're selling it to you for $25, whatever it may be. We're talking about the price that is going directly to the farmer. That's what you're paying the farmer. Nori will add a 15% fee on top of any sale. And that's Nori's revenue stream right now. And that's what keeps our marketplace going so that we can, build the tech and all the interfaces and everything that goes into selling carbon credits for farmers.
I think we've addressed pricing, unless you tell me there's something that we need to cover, Kyle, beyond that, because then I want to get into measuring and quantifications.
I have one more thing on pricing, if Kyle doesn't.
Go ahead.
So kind of like you're alluding to, it's kind of tough to be like, this is what it's worth. Nobody really knows what carbon is worth right now. And that's why later this year, we're launching our token. So right now, a farmer gets paid in cash. Soon we'll have a token, which is basically like a digital asset that the farmer can hold on to. And it's a secondary marketplace to see what the true price discovery of carbon is. And therefore the farmer themselves treats it like a commodity. Like, oh, I am watching the market price of this. I'm going to hold on to this token and then I'll sell it and trade it for cash when I deem the price is right. So having that as what the actual driver for price discovery is, I think will be really important, because like we were talking about earlier, of farmers get paid and then companies sell. Companies can have kind of a cheap out of addressing like their climate goals, because it's really expensive to reduce emissions. And so like, oh, if we can pay $15, $20 to kind of offset it, like that won't be as hard. But having actual price discovery will be like, we need to raise that price so that the reduction of emissions and the removal of emissions are equally yoked. And people aren't getting kind of a free pass out, and farmers are getting, what it's worth. But that's our solution long term to like what that true price discovery will look like. In the meantime, we set the floor price. Geo tries to sell it for more.
I have two just quick things on pricing, and I know you want to move on, but I guess what I would throw out is the idea that I like Nori's approach to this, and the fact that our interests are aligned. I mean, they have a good vested interest in me getting as much for these credits as I would like as well. So that first off is good. The other comment that I will get from constituents of mine different times will be that you're not getting enough for these, Kyle. I can't change my practices for what you're getting for these. And I say to them, I agree. You shouldn't change your practice. In my mind, you should not change your practices for this alone. It has to be beneficial to your operation in other ways, because this doesn't pay for the practice change necessarily. This is just a bonus on top if it makes good agronomic sense for you to change these practices at your operation.
Yeah. So bingo, we got to make sure making it work for the farmer is something that Rebekah talked about, that she's like, I want to always make sure when we're talking about this, that the landowner operator understands that we're going to make this work for that. You can't jump through hoops and spend $40 on new practices to get $7.50 an acre. And is that a fair number? $7.50 an acre. Is that a fair number, Kyle?
Yeah, it depends on the program, but anywhere from that to 15, it really all depends on 15 to I would say the high is probably 20 and the low mark is probably 7. With what I'm currently doing. Okay. So you got $7 corn. You're in Iowa. Let's see. You can drive your truck down the road and throw some seed out and get 200 bushels an acre and that kind of ground. You know what I always say, Kyle, and you'll agree with this: the deeper the topsoil, the dumber the farmer. And you're fairly well represent that, right? 100%.
So anyway, let's face it. You're in a very good part. I'm kidding, of course, dear listener. Although I grew up farming in the rocks, and it makes you think, well, who's the dumb one here? What you got is a chance to make a lot of money per acre. I mean, even with these input prices, 230 bushel corn, at $7, it's just, there's some big numbers here. Can you fool around with a bunch of changes that are going to get you $10 an acre on carbon? And I know that things are fat this year. There's going to be another year at skinny, but like you said, maybe you're not even fooling around that much. Maybe you didn't make any wholesale changes.
I'm not making the changes so that I get an opportunity to collect a carbon payment. I'm making the changes because they make good sense for my operation and help me drive towards that 230, 40 bushel mark. And that they're the right thing for us to do from a conservation standpoint, from a longevity standpoint, and from, just an overall profitability standpoint. For me, carbon, and not everyone would necessarily agree with it, but as an income stream on my operation, carbon is a way for me to monetize my data. It's there. I mean, there is an ancillary factor here of reasons that I do this, but changing all of my practices just because I get to can't have an opportunity to collect a carbon payment is not the sole driving factor at all. It's a way for me to monetize the fact that I've kept good records.
I have a question for you. You said that you're not changing your practices or you wouldn't recommend changing your practices for something like this. What would it take? What would the price need to be for you to say, okay, it's worth for me to change my practices so that I can participate in a market like this?
Yeah, so I've been asked this several times, and this is probably a moving target over time, but I think that the thing has to approach $50 a ton to drive a very, very, very scalable action here. Now, I'm not suggesting that it's not worth doing, Gio. I want to be very clear.
Sure.
I want to be very clear with that, because these practices that we have implemented and changes that we have made are very beneficial to our operation. I'm just saying that carbon isn't paying for it.
Sure. Strictly from a business standpoint, I completely understand where you're going, but ideally, right, the goal for, Nori, the goal for climate change as a whole is, to make this as incentivizing as possible for our farmers who aren't practicing this way to say, okay, I can change my practices that are better for my bottom line. They're better for the planet. And they'll allow me to, operate in a marketplace like Nori's, right? There are many other marketplaces.
That number's not perfected, but
sure.
I think somewhere in that neighborhood, you start to drive change specifically because of the ability to participate in carbon markets.
Well, let's talk about the practices, because you know what, Gio, and remember, I'm not out there every day. My farmland is rented out, but I've got my hands are somewhat dirty, not as dirty as an everyday practice guy. It probably depends on how many practices you're talking about changing. I think that cover crops are the way of the future, because we've got $12,000 or more land, and we have people still going out in fall plowing it and letting it blow away. Why would you do that? Would you go out and plow up your 401k and let it blow away? No. So anyway, cover crops should make you obviously better for this thing, because then you're harnessing carbon more of the year. Are cover crops a requirement? Does Kyle, do you have to do cover crops?
So we do cover crops, but it is not a requirement. It's one of the items that lead into the algorithm that help it.
So you are doing cover crops. Okay. No till, but not on everything. Till, right?
What's that?
No till or reduced till.
Yes, correct.
Okay. So what additional practices would even pull more carbon out of the sky, Gio, as a question I would have? Because in other words, he's already reduction of fossil fuel burnage, maybe? I'm just trying to think here. What else? What else?
I would turn around and I would send Rebekah a note saying, what other practices can you do to pull carbon out of the sky?
Well, I'm just trying to think here. What more would you do? What more would you do?
So for one thing that I want to be clear in my operation is, because I'm not 100% cover crop guy, I'm not 100% no-till guy, I'm not 100% reduced tillage, VRT, fertilizer, whatever, it's implementing those practices across more and more of my acres over time is what, makes me available.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not everybody's like full stacked of pure carbon sequestration, right? So there's always something more to add. And the way I think about it is like, what drives more photosynthesis, right? That's the actual thing drawing carbon out of the atmosphere. So if you have more photosynthesis happening above ground and then not, like tilling up the soil, it will go down there and stay. So expanding your crop rotations, more biomass accumulation, diversifying your rotations in that sense, adding in cover crops and not tilling are like the big ways of doing it. But there's always more ways to get more photosynthesis on the land.
I'm guessing that when Gio has to sit down and talk to some company, like we've used Shopify as our hypothetical example, because they've been a buyer of carbon through the Nori system. Somebody from Shopify says, "Hey, this is great. We believe in carbon sequestration as a means to fixing some climatological issues. We're going to give some money to Kyle in Iowa. it's significant. It's not $20. It's maybe 100,000, whatever that number should be. And I'm not getting in your pocketbook. What's Kyle going to do with this money? Is it going to help the long-term environmental goals that we have here as a company, Gio? Because I want to know that this is actually going to do something good versus just me being extorted for some carbon money. Is that a question you get asked, Gio?
Yeah, it is a question that I get asked. And, we've asked a couple of farmers this, Kyle. I'm not sure if we've sent this question your way, but what is it that you're doing with these funds? And, most of the time, the answer is along the lines of reinvesting it back into the operation, and continuing with our long-term goal of improving our practices on the land, which, in turn will continue to sequester more carbon from the atmosphere. But one of the cool things that you're doing with Nori as a buyer is you're investing in this model. You're investing in this machine that's allowing these farmers to be able to get paid to sequester carbon from the atmosphere, to, as Kyle's saying, monetize their data, to just start to start this machine that needs to be our future in terms of taking carbon out of the atmosphere. And if farmers are able to do that, the question then becomes, how do we scale it? And that's a matter of collecting data now. It's a matter of rewarding early adopters. It's a matter of proving to the world and to the farming community that this can be done. You can take carbon out of the atmosphere. You can improve your soil. You can improve your bottom line, and you can help the planet. So that's what Nori is doing right now. We're trying to put all the pieces together, and those investments from buyers are, one of the crucial pieces that allow us to do that.
What are you doing with the money? Hey, Kyle, what are you doing with the money?
Well, Gio wasn't wrong in saying that, we invested back into our operation. And the thing about carbon over the last—
Wait a minute, you're in Iowa. How much of it goes to Bush Light? That's probably the question.
Well, that is a key component in growing a bushel of corn in Iowa. And so, yes, there is a sliver of it that definitely goes to Bush Light. I mean, I'm not lying a bit in saying that, but carbon for our operation has gotten to a point where I always tell our team that, a little number times a big number becomes a big number. And so as you scale this, this is a significant revenue stream for us and becomes as meaningful as any of our other business operations. And so it makes it so that my operation can be sustainable during down times, but then also makes it so that I can implement the practices that may not have a direct correlation to an instant ROI, but long-term that they're the right thing to do. It makes it so I can weather the storm of investing in those things early on to realize the benefit for my kids and for the next generation, right? And so by that money coming into the operation, it just makes your entire— it's the whole thing around other revenue streams, makes the entire operation more sustainable, and makes it so that you can continue to invest in those things that are long-term returns on your investment that are just hard to measure, right?
I guess I'm gonna have a little deep thought here, all Bush Light joking aside. I've always been a soils guy. I was going to be an agronomist. I was all about this, T by 2000. If you're an old person listening to this, you know what I'm talking about. I was reading the soil survey maps when I was a teenager and all this. But anyway, and you'd read about in third world countries where they're doing slash and burn. And you're like, my God, those soils after 2 years are completely depleted. All of the natural resources were the biomass that was above ground. Why are they doing this? And then, of course, you realize, from economics, they're doing it because they're desperate. And so you're desperate and you do bad practices because you're desperate, and then you never get ahead. I'm thinking big picture. If carbon payments make it so you can do better practices today, and again, some of that stuff that I am completely opposed to, like fall tillage of rolling prairie soils in a cold climate because they can just blow away. If you can use that carbon money to do good practices, it's almost like the concept of compounding interest, because now
yes,
it cushioned you in a bad year so that you didn't have to do something desperate or stupid, and you could continue to do good practices that build upon one another. So it becomes that thing of, it's like good health creates good health, good habits create good habits. That's where I think this has got the real play, because 20 years from now, when we're talking to Kyle, he's going to say, yeah, let me tell you about my soils, how they look now versus how they looked when I first started doing the carbon thing. And the soil, where it all begins, let's face it, is I think where the big benefit is long-term. Does that sound reasonable?
I couldn't agree with you more. And Rebekah is the scientist that can give you a better answer than I can.
All right, Rebekah, give me the wrap up. We've decided that this is all good. I think it grows. Where does this go? I think it grows. I think that we're going to get to where this isn't just nascent. It's not just early adopters. And it's not just people like Kyle. It's a bunch of us that are out here in the carbon thing. Is that an accurate prediction?
Yeah, I think my dream vision of what this could look like is farmers aren't just making their agronomic decisions based on increasing their yield. They're making agronomic decisions for storing more carbon in their soil, because there's an economic driver along with all of the crazy environmental benefits from doing these practices. That's actually going to be the driver, as they're talking through with their agronomists, of what that actually takes to maximize their profit from soil carbon alongside yield.
I think there'll still be some producers that just like, you still go to the auctions and they're in their bib overalls and they're talking about, 1970s crap, and they're never going to be, they're not even late adopters. They're you know what, they're dinosaurs, and they're going to need to get, we need to own their stuff. But the point is, I think it's going to appeal to a lot of us. Here's a question, Gio. Can you keep bringing in the money? If we keep bringing you acres, can you keep bringing the money, or is this finite? Is it going to get to where after we get past the Shopifys and the bluesky.com that they say, we're not doing this unless it's forced?
Yeah. I mean, there's 2 trillion tons of human put up their carbon into the atmosphere. I couldn't find a better word for that.
I think they would probably not call it human put up there.
Yeah.
I think they might call it like
humans have put 2 trillion tons of carbon into the atmosphere since we started burning fossil fuels much more heavily at the dawn of the Industrial Revolution. So in terms of a market cap, we got a long ways to go. And then you couple that with the fact that, every company in the world, it seems, is coming out with dates which they're going to be carbon neutral or carbon negative, or, reach these climate goals by 2024, 2030, 2050, whatever it may be. So there is a lot of potential to tap into. There's a lot of companies in the world out there that are looking to do good with the amount of money that they are earning. There's a lot of companies out there that are actually threatened by climate change. And, if we don't do something about that, then that threatens their business in the future. So, it's a long-winded way of saying I don't think that we're going to have too much trouble growing the demand side of things. Ideally, we're here so that we make it easier for suppliers to get paid. And then in turn, we create more suppliers of carbon removal. And in turn, we're taking more carbon out of the atmosphere. That is what we boil it down to.
Closing thoughts, Kyle.
The last thing I guess I didn't do a good job of mentioning before is that, what do we do with the dollars? And when I talk about this buffering our operation, is that because implementing these practices isn't perfectly linear, and I can't stress that point enough. You don't instantly get a benefit from implementing any given regenerative practice. And over time, you're going to have continued bumps in the road. I'm going to give you an example. We've been implementing cover crops for about 10 years now. And every year that you talk to me is a year that I've done more cover crops than the year before. But this past year, we had a frost that came through on Memorial Day weekend. And every field that I had cover crops on froze 100% of the crop. If I had tilled the field and it was darker, it didn't freeze. And so any place I had cover crops this past year, I had to replant on Memorial Day. So that was detrimental, right? That was a bump in the road. That was not perfectly linear. And so I think we're doing ourselves a disservice if we suggest to folks that just implementing regenerative practices is a perfectly linear pathway to better soil health and better yields, and everything is perfect all the way along. That's why these payments and getting them boosted up to a point where they can easily pay for the practices and buffer this for us helps it so that we can survive bumps in the road like I just had this past year around cover crops.
Yeah,
but the other thing I would close with is that I told you I'm a capitalist. I do think that this is an important thing, but man, carbon in the carbon industry it's a reason that our communities can agree on something for very, very different reasons. And the number one thing I tell friends of mine is, man, don't be a cynic of this industry. This is a positive thing. You don't have to believe in it for the same reasons that other folks may or may not, but man, it's a good thing for all of us. And name one other item in our culture today that we can all agree on for different reasons. There aren't many.
That's a good point.
I think that was a good way to wrap it up right there, that, you know what, when environmentalists aren't opposed to agriculture, it's a good thing. When capitalists like Kyle can get money from tech companies, that's a good thing. If people have more questions about this, where do they go, Rebekah?
You can go to nori.com/growers, nori.com/growers.
Nori.com. Kyle, if anybody says, you know what, I want to get it straight from the farmer's mouth, how do they find you?
You can go on our Facebook page, MBS Family Farms, and there's contact information galore there. That's probably the easiest way to get hold of us.
His name is Kyle Mehmen, and it's spelled Mehmen. And Kyle, you come back on another year or two and tell me where the carbon journey has taken you?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate Nori being explanatory. And yes, they are a sponsor, full disclosure, but also I had them on because I think this is very educational. I think that this carbon thing is still wide open and we don't know for sure. And that's why I brought this to you, dear listener. Thanks for being here. Share this with a friend. Share this with a non-agricultural person that's hearing about the carbon markets, because maybe they can now understand a little bit more than they did. And again, you can go to Nori or you can go and check out Kyle Mehmen and find out more. Till next time, thanks for being here. Thanks all of you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Until next time, it's the Business of Agriculture.
This episode of The Business of Agriculture was brought to you by Nori. If you're feeling left out of carbon markets, Nori is a carbon removal marketplace that welcomes early adopters of regenerative farming. We work directly with farmers to enter their data and project their carbon credits, which the farmer owns and sets the price on. Nori is the marketplace, not the middleman, so farmers get paid directly once their credits are sold. We believe that carbon credits should be an asset the farmer controls, not the rights that they sell. To learn more on how you can enroll your farm, visit nori.com/growers. And if you are a company looking to get involved with carbon markets, reach out to hello@nori.com. Nori, a carbon marketplace for early adopters. Visit nori.com/growers.